Yeah, ladies and gentlemen, it's my great pleasure to welcome you to this 5th International Community Wind Symposium and Community Power Forum. Before I talk any more, I would just like to mention that we have simultaneous interpretation here. We have two interpreters, Mrs. Grabemann and Mr. Meuren, and you can choose your language channel at the bottom of the window here, either by choosing English channel or German channel or off, then you will hear always the original sound. Ich sage es noch mal kurz auf Deutsch. Erstmal herzlich willkommen. Wir haben heute Simultandolmetscher hier, Frau Grabemann, Herr Meuren, und Sie können im Zoom-Fenster unten Interpretation Ihre Sprache wählen. Entweder wählen Sie Deutsch oder Englisch oder bei Off bekommen Sie immer den Originalton zu hören. Yeah, with this, again, I hope that now everybody can choose the right language, the right channel you want. Again, a very warm welcome to this symposium, which has a very important topic. It's about the role of men and in particular women in community energy. This symposium is the 5th International Community Wind Symposium, which we've been doing. Previous 4 dealt with other topics, including, for example, the impact of auctions on the community wind sector. And this time we focus on the important role of the gender balance in community energy. It's the first time that we do this as an online event. Before we used to meet personally. I think that was also always a very valuable experience. But due to the pandemic situation, I'm very glad that we can also meet in this way and exchange our views. The symposium this time will present you the results of a survey that we've been doing in collaboration with our partners, in particular the Regional Association for Renewable Energy, North Rhine-Westphalia, Landesverband Erneuerbare Energien, North Rhine-Westphalen, and also the Japan Community Power Association. Let me mention also that this event is a public event, so we will have not only the people that are attending here, so whenever you raise your voice, you write something in the chat, it's also can be read by or heard by other people. We are streaming this event in parallel on YouTube. So please be aware that also when you want to show your face by switching on your camera, that you might be heard by other people as well. In case of questions to the speakers, please feel free to type your questions in the chat window. There's a chat window so that we can refer to the questions here. That is for the whole day. And we will also request you to stay muted until we call the speaker, we call you to speak. Yeah, then let me also start saying thank you, because I know we will have almost many hours or a full day ahead. Let me say thank you already at the beginning to all our partners, because I know that not all of you will be able to stay the full day. But let me say thank you in particular to our partners, our main partner here, Landesverband Erneuerbare Energien, NRW, ISEP Japan and the Japan Community Power Association, all the organizations which are supporting the project and the symposium, to the members of the project advisory board, which are giving us very important advice. And of course, last but not least, to the 2 foundations, in particular the Stiftung Umwelt und Entwicklung, the Foundation for Environment and Development of North Rhine-Westphalia. Very pleased we have the other managing director, Christiane Overkamp, later talking to us, and of course also the Foundation for International Dialogue of the Savings Bank in Bonn. With this, I had the pleasure now to invite our partner, Madeleine Bode, who is representing here the Regional Association for Renewable Energy in North Rhine-Westphalia, Landesverband Erneuerbare Energien Nordrhein-Westfalen. She's the project officer in charge of this project and doing this in parallel and together in close collaboration with Timo Karl, who is the project officer on our side, who will speak later to you and present us the findings. Madeleine, a very good morning to Düsseldorf. I suppose you are there. And now the floor is yours.
Ja, hallo nach Bonn und überall ansonsten hin. Sehr geehrte Damen und Herren, liebe Kolleginnen und Kollegen von der WWR, liebe Gäste. Im Namen des Landesverbandes Erneuerbare Energie Nordrhein-Westfalen möchte ich Sie recht herzlich zum 5. Internationalen Bürgerwind- und Bürgerenergiesymposium begrüßen, welches wir in diesem Jahr tatsächlich erstmalig digital durchführen. Damit betreten wir gewissermaßen gemeinsam einen neuen Weg, und das ist auch ein gutes Stichwort: gemeinsam neue Wege gehen. Denn unsere Energieversorgung befindet sich an einem entscheidenden Wendepunkt. Der Ausstieg aus den fossilen Energien und der Atomenergie ist beschlossen. Die europäischen und bundespolitischen Klimaziele werden ehrgeiziger und bewegen sich, wenn auch immer noch zu langsam, in Richtung einer Vollversorgung mit erneuerbaren Energien. Und auch wenn die Corona-Pandemie derzeit die akuteste Bedrohung ist, so dürfen wir auch in diesen Momenten nicht vergessen, dass mit dem Klimawandel noch eine weitere gesamtgesellschaftliche Herausforderung vor uns liegt, die konsequent angegangen werden muss. Als Landesverband setzen wir uns seit mehr als einem Jahrzehnt für eine nachhaltige und für eine dezentrale Energieversorgung ein, die vor Ort und aus der Mitte der Gesellschaft heraus erzeugt wird. Denn Bürgerenergieprojekte tragen einen entscheidenden Teil zum Umbau unseres Energiesystems bei und haben gerade in Nordrhein-Westfalen eine lange Tradition. Landwirtinnen, technologieaffine und umweltbewusste Bürgerinnen haben hier schon weit vor Beginn des ersten Erneuerbare Energiengesetzes gemeinschaftlich Projekte in der Fläche realisiert. Denn Bürgerenergie bedeutet echte Teilhabe, ist Energie, die vor Ort erzeugt und genutzt wird, und ein Mehrwert, den man unmittelbar sehen und spüren kann, der ist eben nachhaltig und akzeptanzstark. Eine Energieversorgung, die aus der Mitte der Gesellschaft heraus praktiziert wird, muss aber auch in der Lage sein, die gesamte Vielfalt der Gesellschaft abzubilden. Und ein Baustein von vielen ist dabei eben das Thema Gendergerechtigkeit. Während Frauen in der Umwelt- und Klimabewegung bereits sehr aktiv sind, was beispielsweise die Beteiligung bei Bewegungen wie Fridays for Future zeigen, scheinen Frauen bei der Umsetzung der Energiewende unterrepräsentiert zu sein. Und mit dem Anspruch, den wir als Verband an eine dezentrale Energieversorgung, aber auch an uns selbst stellen, ist es vor diesem Hintergrund umso bedeutsamer herauszufinden, wie sich Gender-Aspekte im Bereich der Beteiligung an Bürgerenergieprojekten wiederfinden. Und daher haben wir uns wirklich sehr gefreut, als die WWR mit der Idee zu einem gemeinsamen Projekt zu eben diesem Thema an uns herangetreten ist. In den vergangenen Monaten haben wir bereits eine Bestandsanalyse zahlreicher Bürgerenergieorganisationen in Nordrhein-Westfalen erhoben. Und ohne dem späteren Vortrag von Timo Karl jetzt schon zu viel vorwegnehmen zu wollen, es lässt sich sagen, dass Frauen in der Tat in Bürgerenergiegesellschaften unterrepräsentiert sind. Welche Rolle jetzt hier die Größe der Bürgerenergiegesellschaft oder die Technologie des Projekts spielen, das sind spannende Aspekte, die wir uns später anschauen werden. Grundsätzlich zeigt sich jedoch, dass Frauen und Männer noch nicht gleichermaßen für eine Beteiligung mobilisiert und motiviert werden. Das Problembewusstsein innerhalb der Gesellschaften ist zwar durchaus vorhanden, aktive Maßnahmen zur Förderung der Gleichberechtigung von Männern und Frauen wurden aber tatsächlich in den seltensten Fällen eingeleitet. Und genau hier möchten wir mit unserer Langzeitstudie dann ansetzen. Nach unserer quantitativen Bestandsaufnahme werden wir vertiefende qualitative Interviews durchführen, um eventuelle Defizite auf Seiten des Gesetzgebers, aber auch der Bürgerenergieorganisationen selbst zu identifizieren. Denn unser Ziel ist es, Handlungsempfehlungen zu erarbeiten, die eine breite Mobilisierung aller gesellschaftlichen Gruppen ermöglichen und die Energiewende damit eben zu einem echten Gemeinschaftsprojekt werden lassen. Daher freue ich mich, dass wir heute in diesem Rahmen alle zusammengekommen sind, um miteinander einen Blick über den Tellerrand zu wagen und uns kritisch zu hinterfragen, wo wir eigentlich gerade stehen und welchen Weg wir noch gemeinsam gehen können. Und die Tatsache, dass wir heute Vorträge von Entscheidern aus so unterschiedlichen Bereichen hören, sei es jetzt Politik, Wissenschaft, Wirtschaft, Interessensvertretung und auch noch aus verschiedenen Ländern, das zeigt eben, dass wir über ein Thema reden, wo jeder einen aktiven Beitrag leisten kann, Daher herzlichen Dank, dass Sie heute alle hier sind, dass Sie mit uns gemeinsam frischen Wind in die Bürgerenergie bringen möchten. Ich bin gespannt auf die heutigen Vorträge und Diskussionen und wünsche uns allen eine gute Zeit. Danke.
Ja, ganz herzlichen Dank, liebe Madeleine. Und auch nochmal an der Stelle ist mal ein guter Moment, Danke zu sagen für die sehr gute Zusammenarbeit für dieses Projekt auch. With this, I'll switch then back to English. I think I was just asking the chat whether our attendees are more English or German speaking. Not so clear. I think it's about half-half. So as I'm here for the international organization, I continue my speech in English. And it's my great pleasure now to welcome Christiane Overkamp, who is the managing director of the Foundation for Environment and Development of North Rhine-Westphalia, die Stiftung Umwelt und Entwicklung Nordrhein-Westfalen. It has been I can already say, long-term partner for us, a supporter of our activities related to community energy. And let me underline that that's really very, very important, because of course, those community energy actors are small. You can find them all over the world, but we're very grateful for also the financial support that we're getting, because otherwise it would be quite challenging to do that kind of work that we're doing here, which has an impact, of course, here in North Rhine-Westphalia. But as you can see, also we have an impact outside North Rhine-Westphalia and Germany. So Christiane Overkamp, I'm happy to welcome you and invite you to welcome our participants as well.
Yeah, thank you, Stefan Sänger. And I'm very happy to be here, and we are very happy to fund this or co-fund this project. So let me say a few words in the beginning why we are so happy to be part of this project and why we consider it very important. Our foundation, Stiftung Umwelt und Entwicklung Nordrhein-Westphalia, was founded by the state of North Rhine-Westphalia, so this very region that Bonn is also placed in. And our sole purpose is to foster, to support, to fund citizens' participation in what we are now used to call the transformation towards sustainability. We were founded some 20 years ago, and our root lies in the Rio conference, 1992, and in the Agenda 21. And already then, it was highlighted that citizens' participation is key to the transformation towards sustainability. But I'd hold the opinion that today it is even more obvious that it is key, and it is even more important. And why is that so? Why is citizens' participation so important when we look at this big transformation that we are in now? I think in order to understand that, it's important to look at the state of the transformation that we are in now. If you look at what is the key challenge at the moment, when we look at the transformation, then the key challenge is not technology. It's not the technical solutions, because the technical solutions, they are by and large there. They have been piloted, they have been tested. So we know what we need to do in order to do the transformation. So we know what we need to do. The key challenge is, how do we as societies agree on the transformation, and how do we shape it? How do we distribute gains and losses? How do we solve conflicts of interest? And that is where citizens come in as key actors. On the one hand, because citizens need to agree, and if they don't agree that this is this needs to happen, then the project is going to fail. And I think we are quite aware, given the political tendencies across the world, that the project may well fail. But also citizens need to help to shape it. And a bigger part of the change is happening on the local and regional level. So we need decisions on the global and national level. But if we look at the change and the consequences, then that happens at the local level. And that is where citizens' participation is imperative. And that's also why we are happy to cooperate with the type of projects that you are doing, that is facilitating citizens' participation. And then the particular project that we are looking now is about women's participation. And why is it important that women participate? So I'd say the first reason is quite obvious, because women are citizens and they form, in fact, the majority of citizens. And we know, as the previous speaker has said, that in many areas, their participation is not really facilitated that well, and is not, though the legal framework may allow for equal participation, still there are barriers for women's participation, and they need to be identified and need to be removed. But it's not only because of their citizens' rights that women should participate, but it's also because we may not miss their perspective in these projects. Women still play different roles from men in our societies, and if we miss their perspective, their roles as consumers, their roles as producers, their particular perspective on the challenges ahead and also on the solutions, we miss very important elements to find solutions. And thirdly, I'd say we need everybody for this very challenging and important change that we are in. So we may also not miss out on their potential and on their capacity to contribute. So that's why this project is very important to us. And also, I'd say what is part of the beauty of the project is that that it's an international project. So our foundation also combines the global and the local change towards sustainability, and you also have international partners. So I'm particularly happy to welcome also the Japanese participants here, and I think it's a good element of the project that we consider it possible to learn from each other and also from experiences in other countries as regards women's participation. And I'd say I'm quite excited to hear about the findings that we are going to be presented now, because I think one of the challenges when we look at sustainability issues is that we often do not really know what differences the participation of different groups of stakeholders really make. And I'm quite interested and excited to learn more about the difference that women's participation can make and does already make when it comes to community energy projects. So I'm looking forward to the discussion and the presentations of today, and I wish this meeting very good success.
Thank you so much, Christiane Oberkamp, for your words, and already, I think, explaining a lot also beyond what already Madeleine has explained, why this project is so important and why the role of women in community energy is so crucial. Thank you so much again for the long-term support, and I'm sure you will find the findings interesting that you will hear in the next panel, both from Germany but also from Japan. Now, my pleasure to welcome Stefanie Weckend, who is joining us from IRENA, the International Renewable Energy Agency, which is the international government body for renewable energy, which was founded, actually more than 10 years ago in the city where we were actually supposed to have this symposium here in Bonn. Stefanie, you are leading IRENA's work on the Coalition for Action, which is the branch of IRENA which deals with non-governmental stakeholders. And a couple of years back, we set up a community energy working group, which I have the honor to co-chair together with two colleagues, which will also be here today, Christina Andre and Shruta Furuya. And you are the one who's doing all the work at IRENA to support our activities. And I'm very happy to have you here speaking about IRENA's views on the topic of community energy, and in particular, the role of women.
Yes, thank you very much, Stefan, for this kind introduction. It is, of course, my honor to be representing IRENA here at the opening of the 5th International Community Wind Symposium and Community Power Forum 2021. I am sending my sincere apologies for our Director of the Knowledge Policy and Finance Center, Rabia Fayouki, who unfortunately cannot be with us today. but we will make sure, of course, to share the lessons of the study that will be presented later today. For those of you who may not know, IRENA is an intergovernmental organization, as Stefan just mentioned. And since its inception just over 10 years ago, we do promote renewables and the energy transformation worldwide. We serve as a knowledge hub, advisory resource, and as the global voice of renewable energy. And as such, and this is particularly important also in the context of community energy, and really facilitating renewable energy projects on the ground, we do a lot of capacity building in different aspects and when it comes to renewables. What we have seen in the past years is really a transformative change in the energy sector. We've seen a transition towards a renewable, distributed and decarbonized energy system, and that creates an array of social and economic benefits, including, of course, employment, as we all know. In fact, according to our latest data, the industry now accounts for around 11.5 million employed people, women and men in renewables, including 1.2 million in wind energy. And we forecast that this number is only going to increase in the future to nearly 42 million by 2050. So this offers, of course, an unprecedented opportunity to transform the energy sector in all aspects. Here, what is very important is that the opportunities and benefits are equally accessible and equitable distributed. So taking a closer look at the gender dimension of the energy transformation is, for us at IRENA, a very important step in this direction. As women comprise roughly half of humanity, women are disproportionately affected by economic shutdowns, such as the current pandemic. They are more likely to be informal workers or more likely to be employed in poorly paid, precarious jobs with high risks. Additionally, we have traditionally been largely underrepresented in the energy sector, and my colleague Celia will speak later to this. And the work that we have done in gender, more particularly from IRENA's side. So traditionally, we've been largely represented in the energy sector, as mentioned, and so that really deprives the energy transition of critical capacities. So the energy system of the future that we all together are working on really offers us an opportunity to do things differently. For us, gender diversity and empowerment should thus be a key pillar of the energy transition, as it offers several benefits. First, the renewable energy sector is creating new diverse jobs and greater participation of women in the sector, which widens the pool of talent, knowledge, and skills. Secondly, also the workforce diversity at all levels brings substantial co-benefits for organizations in terms of growth, culture, and sustainability. And I think my colleagues Christiane and Madeleine spoke very well to this already. Third, and to ensure a just energy transition, the equity dimension of its benefits is considered across social and economic groups. And then finally, and most importantly, also actively engaging women in delivering off-grid renewable energy solutions to deliver energy access can really yield transformative and social economic benefits on the ground, as we have seen in our work. Over the last years, the discussion on gender diversity has been very high on our IRENA agenda. So we have done a series of reports on this topic. And among other, the main highlights we found is that women represent almost a third of the renewable energy sector workforce. That for us is by far not enough. Just to compare, and we are very proud to be saying this also from IRENA's side, that we are doing better than gender parity in terms of IRENA employment workforce. So a subsequent report from our series dedicated to only the wind sector shows that the share of women in the sector itself stands at 21%, so even less than the average. This indicates that depending even in the renewable energy sector, different industries have different challenges to overcome in the future. including removing barriers to entry, retention, and advancement. As Stefan mentioned, from IRENA's side, we do also do a lot of work on community energy, particularly through the working group in the IRENA Coalition for Action. And here, one of the focuses, of course, in our ongoing work, which is a compilation of best practice case studies, is also to look at the gender dimension and how to encourage more active participation in community energy projects and this energy decision making. What we have seen in our last work that we launched just in December last year on community energy is that although a lot of governments have adopted policies that value citizen participation and local socio-economic development, not a lot of governments have really designed these policies to also specifically increase women's participation in community energy projects. So this is something that we should also perhaps discuss during today's conference. For us at IRENA, it is essential to remove barriers to women's participation in the renewable energy sector to attract and retain women if we want to meet the growing demand for skills, especially in the COVID-19 recovery context. We feel that there's a need for mainstreaming gender perspectives in policies, creating supportive networks and mentorship arrangements, as we have seen through some of the organizations that are part also today that are really stepped up and also trying to increase different programs to encourage young women through mentorship to really develop. And of course, also to provide adequate education and training, as well as establishing enabling workplace policies and practices. We see that in areas where access to energy is limited, training and improving access to financing were highlighted to be the key. So to conclude, promoting gender equality and including gender considerations on all levels should be a high priority in both the public and the private sectors. I think we should not forget that also the private sector and industries themselves have a lot of work to do. We've seen some companies that have really enacted on this path already, but a lot more work also needs to be done on that side. So if the global energy transformation is to drive sustainable growth and development, it needs to be really inclusive in every sense. And we women, of course, we have to be part of it. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Stefanie, also for already giving us some insights, not only what we've been doing together in the area of community energy, but also how important the gender aspects are for IRENA. I know we will hear more from you a bit later when you will aspects of female participation in renewable energy. But now we come to the, we can conclude the opening of our symposium, and I can hand over to our new chairwoman, that is the next chairwoman, that is Molly Walsh. Molly, great pleasure to have you with us. And you're, now let me just introduce you. You are leading the work of Friends of the Earth Europe in the area of community energy. And in that context, you do a lot of work. You're coordinating also the work of the European Community Energy Coalition, usually from Brussels, but I understand most recently from Berlin. I have the great pleasure to welcome you and hand over to you to moderate and chair our first panel about the role of women in community energy.
Brilliant. Thanks so much, Stefan, and right on time as well.
That's true.
On the minute. Yes, I'm speaking to you from sunny Berlin this morning. I'm delighted to be here, and I will take you all through the next panel. So if I could invite our panelists to turn on their video from this session. So we have 4 great panelists here. So yeah, Timo, Shuto, Celia, Gundula. Brilliant. I will give you a little bit of a further introduction one by one, but we're going to have inputs from all of these panelists this morning, so we get to get a little bit deeper into the topic of the role of women and the role of gender in community energy and the role of gender in acceptance of renewable energy. And then we will have plenty of time for debate and exchange and discussion, which I'm really looking forward to. So when you listen to our panelists, get your questions ready already. So we're going to start with Timo. Timo Karl is responsible for community energy at the WWA. Timo is currently finishing his doctorate at the University at Bonn. One of his areas of specialization is in decentralized energy. Timo, we've already heard some people really eager to hear the presentation that you're going to give to us today, the results of this research. So take it away, and I will indicate to you when you have 5 minutes left to keep you on time.
Yeah, thank you, Molly, and good morning to everybody. Yeah, Timo is finishing since some years his PhD, but this year he's really serious about it. So
Okay.
yeah, thanks for this introduction. I will try to share my screen and also truly start the presentation so that I hope that you can see everything. And okay.
Yes, we can see your screen. That looks good.
Yes. So, yeah, we already heard some words from Madeleine and Stefan about our project, which the World Wind Energy Association is doing here in Germany in cooperation with LEE, with the Association for Renewable Energy here in North Rhine-Westphalia in Germany, and also in Japan with the Japanese Community Power Forum. And yeah, the core element of our 2-year studies are surveys, which we send it out already to community energy entities and also to individual stakeholders, to individual shareholders, I should say, from community energy, to ask about their motivation, to ask about the rate of women in community energy and how members are won. Yeah, because based on the studies which were done before, we can conduct a lot of processes and structures which maybe favor male participation. And we have the first numbers and graphics which I want to present in the morning. How is the actual situation? And I hope that this will be a good basic for us later in the Q&A round to discuss the reasons and to get first ideas how we can improve in this situation, because this is our target for the second study year. Yes, here in the first chart, very briefly, you see that beside the cooperation partners, we have a lot more supporters and yeah, a very colorful, broad range of organizations, networks, associations which support us, and we are really, really happy about this support. And many people from those networks are participating also today, and yeah, it's a big pleasure for us. So, first of all, we asked we asked the community energy entities, why did you start such a project? What is the motivation? And we see that really the most called reason is the contribution to environment and climate protection. Also, create local value is quite high ranked. While financial interests are not the primary reason to participate in such a community energy entity. This is for our topic quite interesting, as we already heard this morning, that in the climate movement, especially young women are very good represented. And we will see in the next chart that in community energy, there is still a lot of place and space for improvement. The actual number in average is 29%. 29% of shareholders are women in German community energy entities, and they held 27% of the shares in community energy. So let me point out that this is a number which is better than in traditional fossil energy industries, but of course we still need here also improvement, as it is not even 1/3 of the shareholders. So next we ask, how are the structures in the management bodies of community energy entities? And we see that when women participate as shareholders, they also get active. They also get into the management, but we also can see differences. So in a board, for example, where responsibilities can be shared, we see a lot more women than, for example, in an executive board. So 35% women in a board, but only 19% in executive board. One reason could be, and we will ask in qualitative interviews, for example, more about this, is that women don't have so much free time for engagement than men, and have to decide how they bring in the best. And maybe that's one reason why shared responsibilities fit better to the time management structures of women. The female shareholders, or the number of female shareholders, is also differing by the type of community energy entities. So on the left side, we see again the general average, which is 29% women. When we speak about cooperatives, we have 33%. When we speak about limited companies, we have only 14%. One reason of this could be that in a cooperative, you can already engage with a smaller amount of money. Also, women are more risk averse in their investments, and therefore a cooperative could fit a lot better than a limited company. It also differs by technology a lot. So we see that women are with 37.4% in photovoltaic, but participating only with 21.5% in wind energy. Also here, of course, they are connected probably. So the form of entities, the technology, how much money you can invest, how much time you can invest, all these questions are probably, most probably, highly probably interrelated to each other. And from these numbers, we have to find out now these structural reasons. But for the moment, we can see that there's also a difference in the technologies. Maybe this is also related that a lot of wind plants are based in the agricultural sector, and also the agricultural sector, is quite male dominated here in Germany. And then we see an interdependence between women which are responsible, which are in management structures and in the management bodies, and the participation of women in general in community energy. So when we take a look at this surveys, which we received back from women, which are then responsible and are in the board or in the advisory board and filled in our surveys, then we see that the number also of women which participate in general is much higher, 41% in this community energy entities, while general average, I told you, only 29%. Then I think really interesting, and we have to debate this for sure, is that when projects are really small with less than 40 shareholders, the participation of women is really dramatically low. Only 7% in this community energy entities. We really find here a quite small man circle. Yeah, I think this is a point about we should really discuss later in the Q&A round. Then we also took a closer look which areas are managed by women when they participate, when they are in management. And even when we see that women participate then in all areas, from the concrete numbers, it's a little bit stereotypes which are reproduced here. Women are especially active in the field of marketing with 60%, and on the other side of the range, financial management makes only 40% women which are active in this field. So yeah, quite the stereotypes which are known. And then we ask, how are shareholders attracted? How do community entities win new members? And we see quite traditional local structures here, which will also reproduce quite male-centered structures. So we see that the personal contact, mouth-to-mouth propaganda, the participation or the organization of local events where commercial for the community energy entities is done, they are dominant, while modern forms of PR like social media is only in the beginning, I would say, for community energy entities. And yeah, so we can also see from previous studies that people which invest in community energy entities, they are most often also active in other local organizations, and this activation rate is also higher from men than from women. Here we have to speak again about the number of free time you have. And so if you speak about the personal contact to gain more members, then yeah, it's obviously that it's also another story which favors male participation. Then let's take a look at the professions of shareholders. Let me say a little bit limiting to this, because we see here that nearly 60% are retired, 58.8%. It's one reason why we also want to do the qualitative interviews, because maybe retired people have also more time to fill in such surveys which are sent out. Of course, also here from previous studies.
Timo,
yes?
Timo, just it's not easy to read that. If you can just read the professions, I think otherwise people cannot understand.
Okay. Yeah, sorry, I will do this. Let me finish the sentence that we know from previous studies that a lot of retired people invest in community energy. And here we have it also with 58.8%. But maybe we have to relativate it a little bit. Yeah, so the other things are, let's point out some highlights, that 11.9% are self-employed, 18.5% are employed, 6.7% are employed in a managerial position, 7.8% work as a civil servant, only 4.6% are houseman or housewife, 9% filled in full-time. So we had a multiple choice question here, of course, what they do. In general, this is another proof that the people which invest in community energy and participate in community energy are male very often, are quite good situation, have a good education, This is the social group which we find in community energy. And then we also wanted to know what are the barriers to participation, or to put it in another way, under which circumstances could you imagine to participate or participate even more? And here we see a clear result that more than 60%, actually 61.3%, pointed out that especially the difficult political framework for community energy is a barrier to participation, makes investors feel insecure. And once again, as women have less capital, are risk averse with their investments, this is another thing which will prevent women from participation in community energy. One big topic since some years here in Germany are the auctions, which make the participation for community energy entities quite insecure, investments quite open question if they will turn out in the end again. And this is something really difficult also for, and especially for social groups with less capital. And so I can finish my presentation, as women are not the only social group underrepresented in community energy, but also people with migration background, 87% said yes to this assumption, 65% young people, and also around 60% for people with impairments, people with low income. So I think we already have a good basic for our next study. When we solve the problem with the low participation of women, we can deal with the next problems. Of course, I also want to point out in the end that the political framework and the social structures are an important factor about which we should discuss, because the people a bit older now, male in most cases, or very often, they did a very important pioneer job. The energy transformation would not be at this point where we are in Germany without these people. So don't get me wrong. And I also think that it cannot be the job from people which work in free time on such community energy projects to think how to solve structural society problems. Of course, they can play a part, but the first step which we need to do is to open this society discussions more for the problem, and to get a political framework which makes it quite easy and very intuitive to invest and participate in community energy. Yeah, this were, let me see. Yes, this were the numbers which I wanted to present from Germany. And now I'm happily awaiting the numbers and the facts and the positions from other countries like Japan.
Thanks so much, Timo. Super interesting. Lots of really killer graphs there. There were just a few questions in the chat about the sharing of the slides and the info afterwards. So is that possible that this presentation can be shared with participants afterwards?
Yeah, good question. So we have a project site on our page from World Wind Energy Association /women in the end. Mm-hmm. Please take a closer look, because we will always keep you updated on our project on this site, and we will also put this presentation after the symposium on this page.
Great. Yeah, I think we have lots of work to do. Not just on gender, but that last slide that we're looking at now with the migration background bar also really jumps out for me. And maybe it's something that we shouldn't see as a one-by-one process, that we first deal with the gender issue, and then with the young people, and then with the migration background. Perhaps it's a intersectional process where we can open up this whole sector to everybody, not just the retired old white guys.
Yes.
As grateful as we are for their pioneership. Thanks, Timo. We'll come back with questions and comments for you in the discussion. So maybe I could ask you to stop sharing your screen now.
Sorry, of course.
Yeah, no problem. And next we have Shoto Furuya. Dr. Furuya is going to bring us the Japanese perspective. He works on community energy-based development in Japan. So I'm really interested to hear from you.
Yeah. I will share my PowerPoint.
Great.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you and we can see your PowerPoint. Looks good.
Okay, so I'm giving 10 minutes.
Brilliant.
Yeah. Actually, I have 14 slides and I'm not sure I can finish within 10 minutes, but I'm one of the most punctual Japanese, so I do my best.
Yeah, you don't have to stress too much. We're in good time.
Yeah. So I'll talk about participation of women in Japanese community energy. It's joint research by ICEP and Japan Community Power Association. Yeah, based on the shared survey questionnaires with Timo, I translated questionnaires into Japanese, and I tried to adjust the questions and the context into Japanese context. So the questions are slightly different, but mostly findings are very similar situations, I think. Then in Japanese survey, we distributed questionnaires to the members and associate members of Japan Community Power Association. And total 53 community power entities are registered in JCPA. So, and we collected 22 responses. So collection rate is 41.5%. And the survey was conducted from January 25th to February 5th this year. And yeah, I will briefly share the preliminary results in a kind of flash chats. So, and then the questionnaires answered by the representative of each organization or the person in charge of business and administration. So in our survey, it's a more leadership. It's a measuring how leadership is thinking about women participation in community energy. Then the 14 male leaders answered and 8 female leaders answered in this survey. And yeah, and then we asked what kind of energy project you are doing. Then in a multiple answer format, then 22 answered in this result. So the solar PV is a clearly majority energy technologies, but some are working on wind and small hydro, and one working on geothermal power, and also biomass power, solar heat, biomass heat, geothermal heat, and also currently new areas of activity is a battery, and also they're doing some energy exchange project. But mainly people are doing solar projects. And we asked what areas you are working community energy projects. So, and then the answers represent almost all over Japan. Yeah. And we asked how many people have invested in community energy projects that have been implemented so far. It's quite different from German context to Japanese context because the business model is really different. So we asked to community power entities to calculate the integrating capital or equity investment and the financial institutions loans and the mezzanine and crowdfunding, etc. Then result was this. So in Japanese context, some business model accept individual people's investment, but also legal entities can invest in the project or project entities. So it's really difficult to say something in this result. But some exceptional cases like this, 10,000 individual, this may be consumer cooperative activities. So it's quite exceptional. And we asked how many individual women have invested in community energy projects. And the result was this, 17 entities answered. And yeah, very broad range of the number of investors, but zero women investors in the 4 cases. So I don't know how to say this chart. And this result is the most significant one from our survey. We asked what is the percentage of business entities ownership by women. It's clearly showing less than 10%, 12 cases. So, and 10, 20, one case, 20, 30%, 3 cases. So really majority of the business entity in Japanese community energy is not owned by women. That's a really obvious result. But on the other hand, some really few exceptional case, 80, 90% or 60, 70% owned by women also exist. So it's a really huge gap between general tendency and exceptional case. And also we ask how many women are in the management members. And this shows also a huge challenge in Japanese community energy in terms of women's participation in the management members. 10 cases were answered, 0 management members. So 1 women in the 5 cases, 2 and 4 cases. So yeah, it's really showing the reality and challenge. And we also asked what kind of business do women do in the management of the community energy business. And in Japanese context, majority is accounting and administration. So yeah, that's the result. And also, we asked also how leaders recognize the female participation in the community energy business. And yeah, this shows that really evenly recognized female participation rate of investors in your energy community business. Yeah. On the other hand, we ask how do you evaluate the percentage of women participation in management members in your company's community energy business so far? So the leaders understand that the management women's participation is very low or low. More than half of respondents think it's really low female participation in the management. Yeah. And yeah, you also asked, have you ever actively discussed women's participation and the role in community energy? No, 64%. Yeah, very almost no discussion. And also we asked, in general, do you think it is more difficult for women to participate in community energy projects than for men. Answering no, 73%. So I can say that there are a huge gap between reality and understanding. Yeah, that's Japanese society's problem, I think. And also, we asked, have you been active in increasing women's participation opportunities in connection with your community energy business? No, 64%. But 3 answered they are planning to do something. And answering the more involvement, how to involvement, but I don't know, but it's really increase the participation. Yeah, that's my presentation. And yeah, this is the most obvious result of our survey so far. And I will follow up this result and ask interviews to some correspondents. So maybe more detailed report will be published later in this year, I think. And I'm really looking for compare this result with Japan, and Australia, and so on. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much. And thank you also for being on time. I learned a lot from your presentation. Yeah, something very striking is, I think, your last few slides there when you talked about if it's ever discussed in the project, women's participation, and if people, yeah, this one, and the next one as well, if people think it's a problem. So yeah, at least we are now having these conversations globally, and hopefully we can bring them back everywhere. We'll have more chance for questions and comments, and also exchange with the other panelists. Celia, I see that you have your video on. Brilliant, welcome. So next we have an input from Celia Garcia Banos Lopez, who's working with IRENA. Celia is an associate program officer at IRENA. She has a background as a chemical engineer and in bioenergetics, but today we'll present the results of an IRENA study on gender perspectives. Celia, take it away.
Thank you very much. Yes, I'm one of those engineers who shifts careers towards the passion. And I think one of my passions forever has been talking about justice and fairness. And for this, the energy transition and engendering the energy transition in particular, a perfect fit. Thank you very much for the invitation and for having me here representing IRENA. I am, as mentioned, coming to present a few of the highlights of our series of report, Renewable Energy, a Gender Perspective. My colleague Stephanie already mentioned a little bit about it. And as he also mentioned, IRENA's mandate is to support countries in their transition to a sustainable energy future. And of course, part of the broader dimension and the broader mandate to achieve a just and fair transition includes the gender lens. So I'm very happy to be here sharing a few of these insights. First of all, as also my colleague mentioned, at IRENA we have been measuring and analyzing the global employment in renewable energy in different dimensions, including methodological issues, assessing skills and training, recommending policies for creating jobs, and also to explore gender aspects. Our last renewable energy jobs review states that renewable energy has over 11.5 million jobs in renewable energy, 32% of which, according to our studies on the gender topic, belong to women, which is above the 22% of share of women in the oil and gas industry, but is still way below from the perfect equity and the more 44% more or less that women account for the overall economy. So there's still a lot to do. And particularly, we have started now a new series of, as part of this series, we're starting to analyze now also what is the percentage of women in the different renewable energy technologies. We started with wind, and unfortunately, the share of women is way below. Hopefully, our next reports, we will start focusing with solar PV, give a little bit of a higher number, but this only means that there's a lot to be done, and particularly also in the different positions, because our survey and the results of our survey show that women still in STEM jobs are even below the average, is 28%. And most of these jobs in the renewable energy workforce are in administrative jobs that the number reach even to a 45%, which again is good news in terms of having a good average, but unfortunately is not as good as or leveled in the different positions. We also analyze, as part of this series of reports, what are the barriers and challenges that women have. And it's interesting to see how, in terms of barriers, both in the access and non-access context, which in the report we normally mention as modern energy, or the modern context, the most important barrier that is flagged by our respondents is the cultural and social norms that influence many of the fundamental decisions that people make. Of course, also it relates to the perception of gender roles, which it's again happening in both contexts. And in the modern renewable energy world, also respondents flagged the fact that it's very important the prevailing hiring practices existing and the lack of adequate awareness about both STEM and non-STEM possible careers in the sector. And more importantly, the lack of professional and personal networks, which are, as we all know, critical to everybody to enter the profession. And when it comes to barriers to retention and advancement, the survey found that the glass ceiling was the most important barrier, again, followed by cultural and social norms, and lack of flexibility in workplace and lack of mentorship opportunities. It is also important to mention that actually in more than half of the participating private sector firms, men represented at least 75% of the board members, which again, this is quite important when considering the glass ceiling issue. In following this report, we had last year a subsequent report to the series, as I mentioned, focusing on wind, and the barriers are very similar to the overall renewable energy sector. Again, in terms of entry, the perception of gender roles and cultural social norms were flagged as the most important, same as in advancement. But it's important to mention that in terms of retention, the most important barrier were considered the lack of fairness and transparency in internal policies, which there's ways to overcome this. I think it's also important to mention that unlike in the overall renewable energy survey, our respondents flagged that women actually possess the skills and knowledge to participate in the wind sector. So this is not, the lack of background is not an issue in the wind case, which again, I think it's very, very significant, knowing that there's a workforce ready and with all the skills and all the training needed. So as our analysis also suggests a range of promising measures and policies that could help to improve the gender balance in both contexts, which could be summarized as mainstreaming gender perspectives, which could be done through gender audits or including trainings in gender awareness in all the companies, creating networks and support mentorship, which I think more and more are coming up, new events and new organizations and new networks that focus on women, but just to level the play field for women to have access to this. Access to education and training, which can be achieved through university curricula adaptation. Some of the main universities in the world are actually adapting the curriculum to attract more women and be more inclusive in their terms. Scholarships, internships, vocational training dedicated to women. Also, gender targets and quotas could be a very good way to, again, increase the number of women. with goals for gender, diversity and equity, encouraging gender through deployment policies, as in the case of auctions in South Africa, etc. Of course, making the workplace a better or an easier place for women would also help by including regulations in terms of, again, fair and transparent internal processes, such as appraisals and promotions, creating mentorship programs, understanding the wage gaps and trying to address them, which I think is something that now the conversation is bringing some momentum to particularly private and also public sector. And again, also trying to get a better work-life balance, which will benefit both men and women, but it's also very beneficial for women, as providing flexible time, job sharing, and paid parental leave for both parents, regardless of being the mother and the father, which again will make men more engaged with the childbearing duties. As I mentioned, again, we focus in our research in both the modern context, but also the access context. The respondents flagged that, again, cultural and social norms were the heaviest of the barriers for women to progress or to enter the workforce, but also lack of gender sensitivity programs and policies, and the lack of skilled and special training opportunities. But in fact, renewable energy in the access context has plenty of opportunities for women, and especially it's in a special case as women normally are both are consumers, so that actually gives them an advantage into participating in the workforce, from the consultation and planning, working in construction, operations, or even developing unproductive uses after renewable energy is deployed. I would like to also bring back the topic which joins us today, and my colleague Stephanie already mentioned a little bit, something that Coalition for Action team in IRENA have been working, which is community energy, which by definition by the Coalition for Action team is economic and operational participation and ownership by citizens or members of a defined community in renewable energy project. I would like to bring this especially to mention a few findings from the recently published paper, Stimulus Investment in Community Energy. Firstly, governments can adopt renewable energy targets and policies that value citizen participation through gender-sensitive consultation. Policies can be designed to encourage women's participation in common energy projects. Secondly, policymakers can support community energy financing mechanisms and business models aimed at disadvantaged groups and vulnerable members of society. Such mechanisms and models should take into account cultural and social norms that create barriers for women. And finally, community energy projects can play an important role in providing access to affordable and reliable energy for productive application. To fully realize this potential, one-stop shops established for community energy should also facilitate women's access to policies and programs aimed at supporting their participation in local economies. Being said this, and as a conclusion, I would like to just summarize again that the importance of mainstreaming gender in energy sectoral frameworks at all levels, from data gathering to gender quotas, particularly in IRENA, we're trying to really work on the gender disaggregated data into filling the gaps, because it's a big issue and we cannot move on without knowing what is exactly the status. Tailoring training and skills development, because there's a need again to adapt curriculum and strengthen mentoring for women. Attracting and retaining talent in the sector through policies. In the access context, in particular, efforts should go beyond the skills and training and also include access to financing and markets, which right now, again, is more challenging for women. And last but not least, challenging cultural and social norms. In this way, women actually can be actions of change for energy transition and sustainable future. Just to also summarize again, and my colleague Stephanie also mentioned, but I think it's important to say how women are more vulnerable and to economic shocks, particularly we're in the middle of one, and this global health pandemic it's been very tough in the whole society, but particularly to women, because women are more likely to be employed in precarious positions, are more likely to be in informal jobs, in short-term positions that are not regulated. So in both contexts of the access and of course in the non-access. And these implications are that women experience greater economy insecurity, which is worsened by the pay gap that exists. So now more than ever, I think it's time for a recovery that includes women in the center of it. And it's not only build back better, but also build back better, including women. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Celia. Super interesting. Lots of things stood out for me, but one important fact was that the skills are there, actually. We have the skills in STEM. So yeah, I think it looks like it's about creating the right mentorship networks, the right work regulations in terms of, equal parental leave and so on. So yeah, really great research you presented there. Thank you so much. We go on to our last panelist now, Professor Gundula Hubner. If I have it right, Professor Hubner is a double professor, both at the medical school in Hamburg and at the Martin Luther University of Halle-Wittenberg. And yeah, Professor Hubner will present today if gender makes a difference when we're talking about acceptance. You're muted, so if you just unmute yourself, whoever had speakers muted in their Zoom bingo gets to fill in.
Now you should hear me.
Perfect,
right.
We hear you, yes.
Thank you very much, Molly. That's very nice. I've never been called a double professor, but that's very nice. And yeah, it's true. So I'm in Halle, close to Leipzig, and I'm at the same time I'm in Hamburg. And please give me a sign when there are just 5 minutes left, because I have many things to tell. So just listening to you, thank you very much for this very interesting presentations, also for the invitation to speak to you today. Where when I started my career, I started with the question of gender in a technological education. So that was in 1990. So it's 30 years ago. And there we started to try to understand why only very few women started to study engineering. And so when I was asked to talk about gender perspective in wind energy, I said, okay, is it still a topic? I mean, I know about gender, so I always control for gender. And we do, my team and me, we do a lot of acceptance research. I said, okay, shall we dive deeper into it? And so thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to really think about why it is important in the high income democratic societies. And that's where I do my research. So I'm really concentrated on the high income democratic societies. Why is it still a topic? Well, so I was checking for in the internet just to see some pictures. Of course, I read the IRENA report and I also read other articles. But then I just checked in the internet and I was finding this. And that made me say, well, gender stereotypes, when you think about wind energy in energy industry, think male, like you do with management as well. And I said, okay, well, I like this, I like being on wind turbines, etc. So I like these photos. And then I tried to find some with female engineers. And what did I find? I found this. I said, wow, okay. So now I ask you, what are your associations when you look at these different pictures? And I try to give you some ideas what your associations might be: nice, energetic, dutifully, spirited, active, passive. And I'm quite sure you're not giving the attributes nice and dutifully to the two pictures above, right? So I think this is already some recommendation to really be aware about how it is communicated about wind energy. I mean, I don't know if you want to identify yourself with this nice lady in the pink dress. Yes, I would do, having free time and enjoying my holidays, but not as a professional. So, and also not also, I'm sorry, I don't know if she's listening, but I think it's a very nice woman with a yellow helmet. But the image she is presenting is not energy. It's not vision. And I'm sure she is, but you don't see it. So I think that's one first important part when we think about cultural norms, about how you call it self-perceptions. So we should offer very positive images with which women can identify that are overcoming the gender stereotypes. As a social psychologist, I also work on gender stereotypes, of course, still. So then I said, okay, now let's check, because that was also on the workplace, and as you reported already on this, thank you very much, from this IRENA, and which I use as well of your IRENA report. But now I have a closer look into the local level acceptance. I'm not talking about community projects. They could be part of it, but mainly we focus on the local acceptance of wind energy projects. And so I checked for the results you find, and then, yes, we do find gender differences, but they're inconsistent. So sometimes we do find that women have lower acceptance, then we find no gender difference. In this US study with Ben Hoon, I was part of that study. And then what we see is that, and we heard this again today, that less females participate financially in projects. And yes, I think one very important part is the gender gap, income gap that we still have in most, not all, but most societies and cultures. And then also we have already heard about from Celia from the glass ceiling effect. And we find this in wind energy, but we find it all over. So we also find it in science, we find it at university, and we find it in industry, all over. So, well, I'm older. So I was wondering, is it still there, this old-fashioned stereotype? Of course, I always work with young students. And yeah, so when you think about caring, longing, concerned about climate change, concerned about the nice animals that are killed by wind turbines, etc., and emotional or social, what picture do you have in your mind? And now, when I talk about achiever, developer, active, about rational, being factual, what image do you have in your mind? I may guess, and I'm quite sure, because there's a lot of research on this, I'm quite sure you have a picture of a woman who's caring, emotional, and also a guy who's more active. Well, I don't want to reproduce the standardized. I just want to show you the associations that are still there. And now you could ask, come on, I mean, we are younger and the young generations use it differently. And then I found this publication and I want to share this with you. And this is from this year, it's 2021. And it says, in most countries, males report having more knowledge than females. Report, right? So they say so. It's not sure that they have it, but they say it. But then it comes, females are more concerned about the importance. Well, females just reported that they are more concerned because they might just fulfill social expectations on the role they should play, being more concerned because we are more caring. But it's just said they are. So that's the first mistake done here, right? And now it goes on, and I think I don't have to comment this. And it says that the results are consistent with the evidence that males are stronger in regard of cause-effect logic, and females are stronger in holistic associations. And I said, wow, okay, and this was published in Renewable and Sustainable Energy Reviews. And as long as any reviewer has accepted this, we are not there where we should be, right? So, well, I'm a professor and I guarantee you I'm close to holistic associations. I said, oh, come on. It's really worth reanalyzing my data. And that's what I did together with my team. They helped me. And so what did we find? So let's get empirical, right? That's better. And then holistic feelings. They are important. We always need intuition to find new topics, to find new questions, but we have then, of course, become empirical. Logic. So what did we do? So throughout several research projects, we gathered a lot of data. And So in one of the projects from Germany, it was very interdisciplinary project with many people on board, and I was happy to be the leader of this project. And well, saying I'm the leader is also not very female, right? So, but I'm the boss, right? So, and sometimes that's also from my personal experience. That's already something to do with it, whether you want to become get a leading position or not. But that's something we could talk about later. So, what we did was we tried to understand what factors influence the social acceptance of wind turbines on the local level. And we spoke with people who are already experienced, that is, they are neighbors living close to these wind turbines. And so we had 50 females, 68 males included in this analysis, but we have several thousands of participants that already participated in our research. But I want to show this to you because this is a very nice summary. And what you see here is from this interdisciplinary perspective are the main factors that influence the local acceptance. We have already heard about economical impacts, so the positive part for the local level. They are important, and the larger bubble means they are more important. Then we also find that the attitude towards the energy transition is important. So it's also the broader political level that has an impact on the local level. Then the trust in the local actors, and of course, impact on nature and residents. And we're talking here with experienced residents, so it's less important for them because they have knowledge and they know it's not that bad. It might be different when you're trying to set up a project. And of course, and we've heard this already, and we find this in the data as well, it's the social norms. That is, we ask them, what do you think? How do the others in your community think about the local project? So, and the people very often think the others are quite negative. They themselves are rather positive. But this thinking the others are negative has an impact on the own acceptance because you don't want to get into conflict with your neighbors, right? So that's the general model acceptance of local wind turbines that are already built, right? And now what I want to show to you is, are there gender differences? How when a female and male assess these factors? So what do you think? How strong is the economical impact? And what is your attitude towards the energy transition? Do you like it or not? Do you think it's sensitive or useless? And also, do you like, or what do you think about the local turbines? Are they positive, negative, etc.? So now let's start with the results. Well, of course, I use the gender stereotype colors, make it easy. And what you see is, no, there is no difference. It's almost zero. The scale was from -3 up to +3. And what you find here is not a significant difference. Both genders are slightly positive towards the local turbines on average. And now the same will be there for each of the 5 factors. There are no gender differences. So they both don't trust very much in the actors. It's not negative, could have been negative, but it's just more between. Then the impact on the nature is, yes, it is seen there. The scale was a little different, was from 0 to 4, so it's not so strong. No gender difference, so nothing about caring or whatever, or concerns. No, it's the same. We continue with the social norms, and this is 0. There's a minus, but well, it's just a 0.03, so it's nothing. So on average, the others are thought not to be very negative, but also not very positive. So it's on the average. And now comes the economical impact. It's not seen very positive from both genders. And also the energy transition is seen very positive. But if you ask them how well is it put into action, people are in Germany, quite skeptical. And so that's why you have this little minus here. But this was again from -3 to +3. So the message is no gender differences. And we find this in other studies as well. So I had my team and my boys, they also analyzed data as we have, and we didn't find differences in other samples as well. And also in the US sample, the large representative US sample, which Ben Hoon has published for the attitudes, and we and my team, we have published it on the annoyance, but that's not the topic of today. So, and then I said, the next question is, and I just did this, I reanalyzed the data, the next results I showed to you, just for this presentation, because I, well, have a closer look to it. And you know why? Because we talked about this already. And I wanted to know, are there differences concerning how strong the impact of each factor on the local acceptance is? So is there a gender difference? Is it so? And that's what we check next. What would you expect? Where would you expect gender differences? If you look to the gender stereotypes, we would expect that females are more depending. That's also one of the stereotypes. Men are independent, active. Women are more dependent and passive. Well, this is not true. These are just the stereotypes. So don't get me wrong, right? So you would expect differences in trust. You would expect differences in impact on nature and residents. That's also reported quite often. And also on social norms. Now let's have a look. Where do we find differences? First, we don't find any differences from the impact of the economical aspects. It's important for both of the groups. So this is a regression model, right? So the strongest predictor could be a 1. So these are it's not very strong, but it's relationships that can be discussed, right? So the economical impacts do have an impact for both genders, and it's not a big difference that you see here. Then you see a difference in the attitude toward the energy transition. It seems not to be important for the women, but for the men. Now it becomes interesting. Trust and actors. There we have it. It's red. The women are more depending. They need to trust the actors, right? Impact on nature and residents, not significant, neither for female or male. Just let me explain. That's because people are experienced. If we would ask this for people who are in the planning process, this might be different, right? I think both genders would have an impact there. But now we come to the last point, and that is the social norms. And there we have it again. It's red for the female, right? So females are more socially influenced if you sometimes listen to what people say and what we just read in this article from 2021. But I'm a social psychologist and I'm working on attitudes and the relation between attitudes, communication, attitude change, and behavior. And if we have a closer look to this, the data tell a different story. And they tell a story about attitude uncertainty. That is, males think they know a lot about technology. It's not sure if they do, but they say so, and they might believe in this, and they even may know, but we just heard the knowledge is there for the females. But the knowledge on electricity, on energy, is less, women may be less uncertain that they are really knowing everything. So that's why they have to find some help to understand what's going on. And so what would you do if you don't know much about it? You listen to the others. That's what we do. So that's, you listen to your neighbors, and you have to rely on the actors, that they are behaving correct, that you can trust them.
So we should ideally be finishing up in 5 minutes.
Yes, thank you. So now, thinking about how to pamper your baby, or how to give nutrition to your newborn child, I mean, after finishing with the mother's milk, if you would ask this, the same kind of model, and make a comparison between father and mother, you might find just the opposite results. That is, a female would be more certain and male would be less certain about their knowledge. And then you would find different results here, you know, the strengths of the different predictors. So what you see here, it's not a gender difference. It's a difference about uncertainty. We will check this further because we sometimes, as I'm a social psychologist, we included attitude certainty sometimes in our service. I will check for this further, but I'm quite certain that this will be the explanation. So the message I want to give is, yes, you find gender differences, but you have to ask why and what's the underlying mechanism what's the psychology behind this? And it's not gender, it's something else. So now some more findings I checked further. That's from our, this is all from our research. And I checked for this, and what we find constantly, the gender differences are negligible. And when you ask neighbors, experienced neighbors of wind turbines, the large US national survey with thousands of people included, I think it was more than nearly 2,000. And there we didn't find it. Then we have over several years samples from Switzerland and from Germany. We didn't find it. And then we have running projects and just finished projects. We didn't find it. And then we also asked in one project where we are trying to find community participation ways to include younger people, to include more female people, just to have more diversity, as you said. We're doing this together with other colleagues, and it's running quite well in Bavaria. And people, that's very interesting. The people there in Bavaria, close to a region close to Munich, they prefer wind energy to solar energy, to large scale solar energy. Quite interesting. But that's a different topic again. But what we see here is we're asking explicitly, are you interested to participate in the planning process? Yes, female and male, they are. And we have many older people, and yes, there they also say, yes, that's me. Sometimes we find it hard to get women to participate in our questionnaires, in our surveys, because they say, oh, that's the topic of my husband. And well, I'm not sure that they're not interested in this, because you see it here. Yes, you want to participate, but it's also the way how you construct yourself, how you understand yourself and the social norms around you and these social expectations mainly. And you have to pay a price when you don't fulfill the stereotypes that are expected from you, male as well as female. So, but we do find a gender difference, and that is male take more public actions against wind energy. And I'm really stressing this public actions, because that's part of the social stereotype, what a guy is, right? And so women are having the same attitude, the same acceptance, but they don't get publicly active against it. Less than men. They do some, of course, but it's on the frequencies are different, the amounts, right? So, summary and conclusion, my last slide. Be aware of stereotypes. And when you read about gender differences, yes, they are there, but they don't tell the story behind it. It's just descriptive. So based on the empirical findings that I showed to you, also gender stereotypes are strongly overestimated. It's also a question how you assess and how you ask the people, of course, methodological questions. But so we see this constantly, that it's really, we only have marginal differences. And you know, you just get published what is significant. So these marginal differences are not published. And then, so gender differences are not given. It's not by nature. Yeah, it's socially constructed. We have heard this already today, and I just can say, yeah, I can prove this or give my prove this. And then we have a biased social representation of wind energy. Just think about the photos I selected for you. It was a selection, but if you look into the internet, you will see it again on yourself, right? And so it's very important to design communication to overcome these limitations. Also, of course, as you already pointed out, to design citizen participation financially and non-financially to include society, that is social balance, diversity. And of course, the question was, does gender matter? Yes, it does, as long as it is in our heads. It's in culture, in our heads. So it's important to know that when we see gender differences, we have to ask what is in our mind, what representations we do have in our own heads and hearts. So how are we biased? Because the social perception tells a lot more mostly about us than about the people whom we perceive, because it's our interpretations. And with this, I'd like to thank you for your attention. And you see, I love climbing on wind turbines. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. I also love climbing on wind turbines and have many pictures of myself like this. Oh, super fascinating. Thank you so much. I'm still reeling from the quote from the paper that somehow made it past the reviewer, about men having more logical, whatever that quote was. Yeah, my personal brand of feminism is very much about reclaiming rationality and evidence-based as a female trait. Like you said, there's space for intuition, and we need to make space for that in science, but we mustn't let the kind of evidence-based rationality worlds be that of our male colleagues only. So yeah.
Well, this started in the Middle Age. So just to let you know, there's some way before. Well, we've gone already some paths, but there's something still to be done. Yes. About empirism, John Hobbes, etc.
Yeah. Yeah, we can get it back. Before we go to questions from the floor, which I'll be very happy to take, I want to hear a little bit more from the panelists responding to each other. So when I take questions from the floor, there's a couple of ways you can indicate to me that you'd like to speak. You can either raise your hand, or you can write a question in the Q&A. And you'll be welcome to ask the question also in German. But first, I want to ask if any of the panelists want to respond to each other or have questions what they saw from each other's presentations. Yes, Gundula, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. I wanted to ask Carl and also Shota. So, because you are comparing your results, right? And I was, you stressed, Carl, you stressed the question of free time. You said women are maybe not having so much spare time because they do much more, whatever. I don't know what you refer to. But then you showed the data that it was only, in the talking about the barriers, was only 12% of the missing time. So don't you think it would? It's more like the social concept, the social self-construct of women, that their participation in these technical parts maybe are not the most important, so that they do something else? Couldn't that be? Might be interesting if you just include a question about self-concept. I haven't done so myself because, but I might do after this session.
Well, if I can start to answer on this, I think you pointed out also in your last chart that this gender difference are socially constructed. I also tried to point out this factor. And I think we gain a lot more evidence if we don't only ask for the gender difference, but also put this into more comprehensive, to ask about income, to ask about motivation. And this was our concrete question: what is your motivation to participate? And then we received this answer. So I think with a different question, we could also receive a little bit different answers, but also this technical deterrence. We always say that women don't participate because they are afraid, maybe that they don't understand enough of the technology. Also, this was not rated very high. So I think that this is a social comprehensive construct and not a single factor, this or that. And we should take a look at this in a comprehensive way.
Great. Celia, do you have questions or reflections from hearing the other panelists' inputs?
I just want to add up a little bit. That's something that I actually didn't include in the presentation, but this is still inside the report. And it goes very well aligned with what Professor Hebner was mentioning. And it's the fact of, one, the woman's self-perception was actually one of the main barriers as well, like not as important as cultural and social norms, but of course, self-perception is a cause and effect of that cultural social norms of the perception of gender roles. And the other one is an interesting, I think, result that when we ask, do you perceive women face barriers? Men could likely say no, they don't, while women could massively say yes, of course we do. So I think it's again a reinforcement of what we are mentioning all the time. This is a psychology and the way that society has shaped the conversation and the perception of what a woman or what a man should be, or it is, for this conceived definition. So just as an additional follow-up, I don't remember the numbers. I think it was only 1 out of 3 men could consider that women face barriers, while women, it could be almost all of them. But again, I think it's a very indicative finding in our report.
Yeah, thank you, Celia. I would like to answer also on this because, yeah, we ask all shareholders. So we ask also, of course, a lot of men in our surveys about their motivation and also about what they estimate. What is the problem for participation? So if they answer that technical deterrence, it's not free time, it's not so much. So this is also, of course, a male perspective. So it would be for sure that we could also receive different results if we only ask female shareholders.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yes, Gundula?
I just want to add to Celia that, well, as I said before, being a boss or something, you pay a price. And so maybe that's something that you talked about mentorship, something that should be really done to mentor women who are climbing up the career ladder. Don't let them alone because they are still a minority, and being a minority is always not easy. And so it's quite helpful to have a mentor at your side, and that's what you need. So networking, of course, like it's already started with some going on longer, a women network in wind energy, but still a mentoring system, I think, would be very good, very important. And then communicate positive models. And positive models, it's not like, I saw pictures, with students, engineering students, female ones, lined up around a wind turbine, and they look quite nice, but they don't look energetic. Why not? And so, I mean, we are not just sweet, are we? I mean, so, but I think we really have to go deeper and to really understand also how women block themselves. There are this problems of the glass ceiling, of course, but we also have this problem with women blocking themselves. And I see this with young women as well. I mean, I have quite a lot of contact. So I think that's an important thing to bring up such a kind of mentoring. Don't let them alone.
Yeah, super. We're trying to build such mentoring networks, and I know I've benefited a lot from the formal and informal mentorship of other women role models. Shuto, do you have any questions or responses for the other panelists?
Yeah, I'm thinking about the motivations of the female leaders to work on community energy. Some of the really outstanding female leaders started activities since Fukushima disaster. So they are really driven by the big accident, and that's motivation. But in terms of the female participation, I think in Japan we have many options to be involved in the community energy process. For example, the really serious leaders establish new company to do a project, and she have to make serious income from the business project. So that's really top of the engagement. So I think some really wonderful leaders are doing this job as her own job. So that's really I like that kind of engagement. But that's not all, because people can participate in the community energy process in many other ways, like some women work as other companies, but spend some time in spot unit activities of the community energy process, like helping marketing or helping the event management or something like that. So there are so many opportunities for women to involved in the community energy process. So yeah, I'm thinking about the meaning of the participation and what's the meaning of the representation of the female in the community energy process. So I don't have any answers, but if someone has comments, I'm very happy to hear.
Great. Thank you. I'm going to go to Christina, who had a great point about risk adversity. And I also see, Stefan, you have your hand. And I continue to invite anyone to put a question in the Q&A, and I will call on you. But Timo, do you have any questions or responses that came up for you listening to the other panelists' inputs?
Well, my question maybe to Shota is, you put out in the data that there are some Japanese community energy entities in which there is a lot more female representation than on average. What is the reason for this? Can you say something more about this?
Yeah, really female leadership case, I think, yeah, one community energy company it's a female CEO, and maybe 90% of the board members are women. So that case, it started from the anti-nuclear movement since 80s. So, and after Fukushima, they decided to do renewable energy. And they are living in a slightly different area from other parts. And in the area, the female leadership is more strong. So, and they have kind of accumulation of the movement activities. And since 80s, many housewives joined to the activities. So some exceptional case that have their own specific context, I think.
Okay, so I understand this, that this is quite good fitting to our argument about the strong role of female front runner, of female leadership, and that the best way to gain female members is to have already female participants in your decision structures.
Yes.
Yeah.
You won't be what you can't see. Is what people say about role modeling. So there's an interesting conversation happening in the chat, but it's actually a chat only amongst the panelists. So I want to bring it out so that everyone can hear it. Christina, are you able to put your microphone on and make your point about risk adversity?
Yes, I'm happy to do that. Yeah, I just made a point in the, thank you very much really to all the panelists for the interesting findings, and then also for Professor Hübner to put it a bit in perspective, because it matters with which perspective we look at the findings. That is what you highlighted to us. And it struck me how important cultural and social norms and perceptions are in all this, and that already came out in the earlier presentations, and I think that's very important. And one thing from the first presentation, there was an interesting example in talking about the results. You said women are risk adverse. So one reason for things might be that women are risk adverse. Now, looking at the other presentations, I think one question that we would need to ask is, are they really risk adverse, or have they learned, were they educated to present themselves as risk adverse, because that's the role stereotype that women would have to meet? That's one question. The other question is, we need to look deeper and find out, do they have a different attitude towards risks, that there might be a real point behind it, not just role models and expectations. But then if they have, then is it good to label it as risk adverse, or maybe say they are risk conscious? Maybe that's what they are. And then if we look at findings when it comes to investment in financial markets, then there are findings that suggest that women might be more risk conscious, and for that reason might be able to make better investments in the long term. So I think that I find that quite interesting and helpful, the combination of presentations that we had here, in order to also help us, or help you structure how you look at the results to come, and how you deepen the findings that you already made. So thank you very much.
Yeah, super. I hadn't thought of that, but it's a really nice switch. Risk averse to risk conscious. Stefan, you have been waiting patiently with your hand up for a little while. Would you like to ask your question?
Thank you so much. Yes. I thanks a lot for these really excellent presentations, and I find this very inspiring, and certainly gives us a lot of food for thought, not only for now, but what just strikes me is, of course, Professor Hübner, you have kind of confirmed my bias that there's not such a big difference between male and female if you look from a certain angle. But still now we have this empirical evidence that there is a big difference when we look at the community energy sector, both now in Japan and in Germany, quite similar. And I know that you just also heard these figures that we presented, and also from Japan. So you may not have now an explanation, but can you comment a little bit on that? I mean, we are in the middle of this now, first to understand how the situation is. We understand it a bit better, and our next step is to find out what we can do about it. So maybe some comments from your side can give us some inspiration for the next steps that need to be done.
I try. Thank you. Well, first I might say that, and Ashoto, I think you would agree that there's quite differences in the social norms concerning gender questions in between Japan and Germany, right? So in Japan, it's quite a different situation for females, but that's a different point. But looking at the point that women become less active in this community energy projects, well, that's the action taken, right? So that's what we also see, that we do find this difference, that the male are more in the role model active on the outside, at least in technical parts, and women are less. And then you have the discussion inside the families, especially the older families. I'm not so sure about the younger ones, but in the older families, who's doing what, right? And who's, yeah, so that might be one part, so that the male is the delegate of the female to participate in the group. I don't know, I'm just guessing, right? But that would fit the model. But so I also know from younger women, so we just, as I told you, we're just doing this participative process in Bavaria together with the German environmental help, Deutsche Umwelthilfe. They are moderating the process. And there we see that, I heard this before, that younger women, also younger men, say they don't want to come to these public meetings because the old white men are really dominating. So it's not attractive to them. And I think we need also different offers, how to integrate people. Now let's think for example, about gamification, about 3D visualizations in the internet. And so that's, for example, what we're doing in Bavaria. We're just going to evaluate how people like this and how younger people like this, so that they can use the media they like, right, the younger ones. And then you don't have to come to these meetings, to these structures that are well established from the people who are dominating the discussion processes in communities. Well, I'm from the land side, so I grew up in the rural area. So, and I think it hasn't changed that much, at least not that what we see, that we have to find new structures, right? So, and I think we should offer, just to summarize, we should offer new models where people could participate without being present in larger groups. So maybe we shouldn't have this larger group assemblies of interested people, but start on different levels and make smaller group there. And then also just ask the people how they would like to participate, and also to give some positive emotions for men and for female, for both. And so we are missing this, right? We just have more rational choices that are made for participating in projects. Even if you found that it's about climate protection, yes, but then when it comes to discussing a wind turbine and your neighbor says, well, I will suffer from it, and you want to build it, then you say, yeah, but it's for the climate. Yeah, but it's my life. You see, all the discussions that are going on. So it's very important, I think, to offer knowledge and to help people to become more certain also on this indifferent or uncertain questions. Because if you just look at one time, you look at the sides of the Vernunftkraft, all these opponent groups, if I read this, I'm getting sick. I mean, physically sick when I read this, and I say, oh my God, my head is aching or whatever. But you don't find the answers to these questions that are empirically based easily. So we need some more information that is posted to the people in a positive way. And we need positive role models. And just ask the young ones. We have people from Friday for Future, etc. They have very good ideas. And so they should be more integrated. Bring it back to the people. I think that's very important, to all people.
Yeah. And communication, right? We know that actually we don't really convince people so much with empirical evidence. And yeah.
No, it's the way how you frame it. Like we just had from what was your name, about the being conscious of risk, or
Christina, yeah.
Christina, right. So it's really a question of framing, and like I try to show you with the photos I found in the internet, it's all about framing. People are, you see, the women are also interested in participating. So we just have to ask them, how would you like to do it?
Great. So we have
well, it's not easy.
No, it's not easy. We've got a lot to overcome. We have a question from Lars in the chat about the reproduction of labor in private households. Lars, are you able to put your microphone on and ask that question? Is that something we need to do as a host?
Yeah, can I?
Yes, please go ahead.
Okay.
Great.
So it works. Yeah, my question is, don't we, at least to some extent, see the kind of traditional role model when it comes to investments by private households, so that it's rather the men taking that decision, so they are investing into community energy. And as has been highlighted in many of the talks, this of course is about role models and can be changed, but yeah, so my question, how far do we have a reproduction of these traditional role models in investment?
Would any of the panelists like to share their thoughts on that? Yeah, Timo?
Maybe I can start. So, of course, it plays a role. So the amount of money, the amount of capital plays a role, but it's not the only reason. So we see that in Germany, women are more probably participating in what was the name? Genossenschaft? What was the English word? I miss now right now.
Cooperatives.
Cooperatives, than in limited companies. So I think that the framework and also the possibility to explain to the people what are the chances now through energy transformation and through participating through community energy. Not everybody even knows what is community energy. So of course we are here now in an expert panel and don't have to explain, but I think outside on the street, not everybody could deal with this term to start with this. And yeah, so I think especially in cooperatives, you don't need so much money to invest and to get started in this. It's like maybe you can invest with 300 or 400 euro and then you can participate. So, but I think you have to explain and to do the commercial on the right positions and to think about how can I speak to people which are not already involved in 3 or 4 other local organizations and talk with them about this topic there. But how can we attract the people on another field? That's one point. And I would just get this further and ask also, because Celia, you had a very interesting presentation about the global situation. And I think one point, and we also had this in our surveys, we had a lot of very interested responses and a lot of people told us it's a great project, what you're doing, but we also had in our surveys, and not only one time, sometimes or a lot of times the answer, go away with your gender bullshit and what you're doing here. And this is not an important topic, what you discuss. So I think it's also an important question, a tricky question also, how can we sensitize male participants that we have to raise the number of female participation, because it is shown in studies that mixed operating entities are more efficient and so on and so on. So how can we sensitize?
Yeah, the energy transition is about changing everything, and change everything. We need everyone, I think, is something that
Yes.
Celia, does that resonate with you? Do you hear something you recognize there?
Yeah, and actually, I mean, it goes beyond community energy in wind, but I think it's something that is important to mention as well. And as I mentioned in the presentation, let's not forget that some countries still have access to finance restricted to women. So that taking the actual decision is well beyond the possibilities if there's not that play field levelized first. So in general, I mean, I think there's a lot of work to be done, but I think this type of discourse and this type of conversation is actually great to at least get that conversation of that bullshit, as some people may have defined. But yeah, I mean, again, first, I think it also goes beyond the fact that some women have restrictions to even apply for a loan or some finance. That is, again, part of how the society is shaped. So this needs to be changed well in the higher, let's say, framework. And this goes again with what Professor Gundula was mentioning, the framework where we are positioned. It's very difficult to shape out.
Shoto, did you want to come in? You were putting your hand up?
Oh, no.
No, okay.
No.
All right.
Yeah, but in terms of decision-making or investment in household, I don't think the traditional gender role is the decisive factor, but more other sort of the things affecting decision-making. So it's a matter of framing. Yeah.
Yeah. Gundula, you had your hand up the old-fashioned way.
Yes, we can use both, the modern and the old-fashioned. So that makes diversity. So Yeah, you're right. I know this phenomenon also that when you talk about gender problems, glass ceiling, quite often also women say, come on, I mean, it's just about qualification, etc. I don't want to have this quota for women because I, you know, etc. Yeah, because we don't want to be victims. I think that's one point. But still, I think we need it. But that's another topic. But when you talk now, and we also had in the chat the question about cooperatives, they might not be more interesting to women because they are different. And this also brings me to the point that, well, why don't we do social marketing? Now, let's say if you want to promote renewable energies, if you want to promote community projects, so we don't have to talk about gender diversity. So why not talking about bringing together the power of climate protection, for example, or bringing together the future, the youth. So we don't have to address the problem directly. And because it might not be a problem on the first hand for several people, and they don't want to talk about this because it could be a burden, because then you start to talk about how you arranged your marriage or whatever. So you might not want to go too deep into that. But you could start with a point that's interesting. Now, if you talk about cooperatives, it might be that they are more attractive because it says you can be part of a community.
Exactly, yeah. There's a comment in the chat similar to that, yeah.
Yes, and so that's why I took it up, right, from Verena. And so I think that's interesting if we have a more marketing perspective about renewable energies, to who's motivated for what reason. And there might not be enough to ask people with the questionnaires, but really go into focus group. You might have done that. I don't know. So, and then to see how we could make it attractive from the eyesight of the people, not from what we think is important. And thinking about gardening projects, for example, and there to bring cultural differences together in gardening, to bring people together and get more understanding, etc. You wouldn't say we are doing a project to integrate people, but you say, no, we want to learn, we want to have experience, we want to taste the difference. And then you get the people in. And so that's something that we should do. Maybe not talk about gender, but talk about future and communities or whatever.
That would be a very interesting analysis, no? To compare community garden groups with community energy groups.
Yeah, cooperatives or food cooperatives. For example, you have a lot of food cooperatives, but it's also, as I think, Carl, you also pointed this out, that there are differences, and I found that quite interesting, between people in the rural areas and in the cities. And so there's many things that could be done. But we need also a lot of money. When you think about it, how much money is put into advertisement, we don't need advertisement, but marketing, how much money is put into marketing by brands of cars, etc. Wow, and they're quite successful. So we need something comparable without much money.
Yeah, and I'm going to come to Timo in a second, but also wanted to echo what Verena wrote in the chat and what you said there. Like, the first thing that jumped out to me when I saw that bar chart with the cooperatives and the GmbH, so the private limited companies, wasn't about investment, but about the values that such organizations represent. So a company which is, organized in a certain way, and we have perceptions of that structure that pre-exist, or cooperative, the words which speak to those parts of our values of cooperation and collaboration, where we as women have been very socialized to activate those values. So I think that could be a big part of that split. Yeah. Timo, you want to respond? We've all been talking about your research now.
Yeah, I think the way how these values are transported and how you communicate about this is very important. And I would agree to almost everything what Professor Hübner said. In the last sentence, he said maybe we should not discuss about gender. I think I would only agree half to this, because we discuss about gender and then we realize it's not only the difference male-female, but we have to get on a more broader a social discourse, how we bring topics into the society or not. So I think, yes, we should talk about gender, not because I say there is this clear difference, males are like this and female are like this, but because it brings us to the real important society topics. And yes, I would agree that cooperatives have a different image a little bit, which they transport. And then if we take a look how leaders of community energy communicate about their projects, then we see that it plays a role, because later we will have a female leader from Germany, from community energy, for example, Miss Barbara Rodi will talk later. She's very active in the climate movement, regional, and she goes to climate demonstrations, and she's talking there with young people, women, men, both. And she says, it's very good that you're here, but if you really want to make a change, you should also get into the projects. And this is not about investing thousands of euros and knowing exactly how a wind plant is built up or not. It's a very small amount, and you can just jump in, and it's a contribution to climate protection, environmental protection, and we are there as a community. We work there as a community, and we see that this it is a cooperative, in fact, that this cooperative got way better participation rate of women than on average.
Yes, interesting. Yeah, I'll take a short response from you, and then I'm going to go to Beate. So if a co-host could invite Beate to be able to speak, that would be great. But first, Kunjula, go ahead with your response.
Okay, make it short. I like very much what you say, Timo, and I think that's also the idea of, you could also create a social competition in changing norms in the communities. And you said you might not go to the groups that are already very active. Yeah, exactly, there you should go, because they are the opinion leaders. And if you manage to put it up like this, that people start to ask, have you got shares? I mean, what's your impact for the community? Oh, I got already 10, and the sporting club has got 20. Oh my God, we have to catch up. So now we need the agricultural guys, they need, or the fire workers, they are 50 now, and then starts the sporting club again, etc. Make this with energy saving, with energy saving bulbs. That's a little different area, I agree. But if you start to change social norms more like a game, or more like a social positive competition, that might be very interesting. So I like the example very much that you just shared with us.
Cool. Beate, you indicated that you wanted to make a comment. Are you able to speak? Are you able to unmute and ask your question? Yes, if you unmute, we should be able to hear you now. I see you on the panel. But I don't hear you. You might need to unmute yourself. Yes, there was. Yes, great.
Oh, I could unmute myself, I think.
Yes.
I did.
Now that you're on the panel, we hear you. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you very much for the important aspects. And as Timo said, I just invite women by just jump into the community and be part of it and become active. And the fields of citizen energy and gardening and mobility, they are all connected and they are all very similar. And it's about the values. It's the difference between just stockholders or really shareholders in the community cooperatives. And I'd like to share my own experience as a supervisory board chairwoman. I think it's very important to invite women and to address them, every single one, to apply as a candidate also. So when there are meetings, I take the microphone and I address especially to the women in the room whether they do not want to be part of the future and to make the future by themselves. But there is one experience I made. It was not so very good. It is the danger that women who are in leading positions try to change to be a better man, and that is not necessary, because the skills we as women have are also very, very important for the great transformation, and we don't have to put them aside to become a better man. So that's another important message I send. And the third thing is, yes, it is, if there is only one position, perhaps men have to step back to let the woman in this position. But in the end, I think the most important is to have really parity, the same number as women and men, of course, both qualified. So, but I think the special announcement to women to give a hand is very important. Thank you.
Yes, totally. Yeah, sometimes we have an expectation that our male colleagues will take the responsibility and step back, but and I very much appreciate when they do, but I also never expect it. We need to take those positions ourselves and not wait for them to be offered to us, because so far it's not what's happened, and push each other as women to go forward. Gundla, you wanted to come back on that question?
If it's okay, well, thank you very much, Beate. I like very much the approach you have. I just want to come to one point, and you said you see that female try to get the better man, and that's an experience that where I've just had a little private chat with Alexandra, and there I just wrote to her that also females have different expectations to female leaders. And me as a professor, I just realized this when I was sitting there, I was working hard, and then a student knocked at my door, a female student, and she had a question. I said, well, you are disturbing, but okay, just go ahead. And, said, and then she asked me a question that was for my colleague, for my male colleague. Then I asked her, but why don't you ask him? And then she said, yeah, I can't disturb him. And since then, I turned more male, if I would put it in your words. That is, I take my time, and I don't want to be disturbed when I'm doing my research. And so students sometimes are a little disappointed because they think a female is more carrying and is a little more like a mother. I'm not, definitely not. And I think that's very important to accept that also females can be very different. You can have very carrying men who take their time for the students very much. That's fine. But it's also fine if you don't do it, if you just keep on doing what's most important. And of course, students are always welcome to me in the speaking hours, and there I do everything for them. So I think we have to be very careful to not produce new stereotypes about what a woman is and what a man is, right? So, but with the rest, I totally agree. And I think it's very interesting what you say, and it's very nice. Well, it's not the the correct word. I appreciate it.
Yeah, I can share a similar experience. Working in an NGO on policy, I get very many questions from people who are doing masters or PhD who ask me if they can interview me. And it's, yeah, it's a bit random when we all get this, who work in NGOs, when we say yes and when we say no. And I've started to have a suspicion that I say yes more often than my male colleagues, because yeah, of course, okay, you're researching it, you're interested, of course I give you my time. But in the end, I'm giving you free time to further your academic career, and I will have to work harder delivering my projects. So I developed a set of questions now where I ask the student what value their research is going to have to the movement. And if they just tell me, oh, it's going to be published in an obscure journal behind a paywall, then I say no. And that took practice. That really took practice for me to learn how to say, sorry, I'm too busy, because I'm not socialized that way. So I think by sharing the story that you shared there, and by sharing that story, we can all encourage each other to, draw those boundaries, because for sure our male colleagues do. Are there any other questions or comments from those on the panel that you want to come back on that? There's another question in the questions and answers from Lars, but we did hear from Lars already. So if anybody else wants to ask a question. Then maybe we go to Lars's question.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to ask if from your studies you know of any further factors, because what we found in our studies is that there are even among registered cooperatives quite significant differences with regard to inclusiveness. Yeah, I would like to know if you have any other clues why this is so, or how these more inclusive, even cooperatives, got there. Thank you.
Yes, so we know about more inclusive cooperatives that that are doing more. I know one, a Spanish one called La Corriente. I'll write it in the chat, or maybe I'll drop a link. It's a super inspiring cooperative, and feminism and gender perspectives are rooted in their mission. So I notice often that when groups are established with strong feminist principles, obviously it continues to run through. And when older pre-existing cooperatives start to think about gender, it's a more difficult process. But many of us will know EcoPower, the one of the shining lights of the energy cooperative movement, and they're doing some real work now where they start to think about inclusion of young people and gender. From the panel, would anyone like to see some cooperatives that they see are getting it right? Timo?
Yeah, I would start. So this will be the next step to get this deeper analysis, for example, between cooperatives. For now, I can speak about the experience I made in qualitative talkings. There is a difference between cooperatives. Then because mixed teams are better in creating more mixed teams. I already pointed out to that. And another factor which I wanted to point out in the presentation is how is the political framework, and the framework is getting more difficult in the last years, or it was getting difficult, and at the moment in Germany it's at least not getting better. So we can see that the number of cooperatives was rising from 2000, and then especially 2008, 9, 10, 11, there were a lot of cooperatives. And then the political framework was getting more difficult, especially since 2017, and the numbers of cooperatives are now really bad, from 200 in a year, I think 2011, to 8 or 9 or 10 in 2019. So we have real bad numbers in this, and yeah, also the female participation, of course, it's rooted to this. If you have to go through auctions with your project, people in general, which have a lower income, low free time for all the bureaucracy, for all the challenges which you have to face, then you go out of these projects. And of course, this is also facing back to the cooperatives.
Great. Yes, Kunjula?
Just directly to you, Timo. So you think the auctions do have a negative impact? Sorry, I do this, I say so because I don't understand why they shouldn't have one when I'm in different contexts and people say, no, I don't know why they should have a negative impact. So, and now you say a negative impact, and I think that's what I would expect. So if you say that's definitely the way it is, and Molly, seeing you laughing, I think you would say the same, right?
Well, obviously, yes. So I can redirect to our previous study where we worked to community energy in auctions, and we see that the participation rate is much lower. The auctions are not sensitive for the demands of a community energy entity. So if I bring in the wind energy example, if you already need money like 200,000 euros just to get some rights and to participate in the auctions, and you don't even know in the end if you will get the project, yes or no. This is something which you can do as a bigger company. You write it in your books, and later you will have the project or not, or you have to give away the money. But how do you want to do it as a little cooperative? Go to your local regional bank and say, I need 200,000 euro, but I don't know if I will get the project in the end, and if I can give you the money back. You will not receive the money, I think.
Yeah, maybe I don't want us to go down the auctioning debate right now. I think it's quite well said and proven, the negative impact that auctions have currently. Maybe let's leave it there. I would go to the panel for the last thoughts and the last roundup, and then our lunch is calling, and maybe we can even finish 5 minutes early and get a good break before we come back for the very interesting sessions in the afternoon. Shuto, would you like to start with your concluding comments?
As we discussed, sometimes the gender is too much framed, and that's a maybe challenges for us. But sometimes the affirmative action or parity or something, that kind of action makes sense in some specific context. So, for example, in Japan, the women's representation is really not well in the management of the companies. But last year, Japan Community Power Association changed its board members. Then we have now 10 board members, 5 female leaders, 5 male leaders. It's naturally we discussed and decided to do that kind of balance. So, and it has very good effect among the discussion and decision making in our association. So sometimes such action makes sense in specific context. So we have to explore what's the meaningful action in community energy to make a more balanced and diversified actions. Thank you.
Definitely. Thank you. And thank you for bringing in that really interesting perspectives. Timo, would you like to share your final thoughts with us?
Yeah, I think it's quite interesting what is happening in the chat right now, that some people point out auctions are misogynistic. Yes, I would agree to this. I would say auctions are in generally a big problem for all people with a limited amount of money and time, which need just projects which are easy to participate and where you can or where you have the imagination that you can bring in your free time in a project in which you're interested in, which brings something for climate, environmental topics, and which you can create local value, things like this. But if we come to the situation that before you can even do a project, yes or no, you have to fill in 200,000 papers, just to say a number, but there are pictures of such staples of paper which need to be filled in, and money which you have to give away first and don't know if you will get it back later. All this make the whole market really insecure, and even when you get through this auction model, when we stay at the wind energy market here in Germany, then it's later still the question, can you build up the wind plant, yes or no? There are a lot of questions then on regional level, on the country level. So this framework which we have makes it impossible for many citizens to participate in community energy, and especially for people with limited time and money. Not only women, we saw it also people with other backgrounds which are not in the major group which is now participating, and even for them it's getting more difficult. So yeah.
Well said and well heard. Celia, what are your final thoughts?
Well, just again, thanking you guys for inviting us, for inviting Irina to share the floor, to provide some insights. And now that International Women's Day is approaching, I think it's the perfect momentum to have the discourse. And from that side, I think from Irina, we have a firm commitment to keep on checking on the gender lens in all our work. We mainstream gender across all our publication and all our lines of research, and we will keep on doing it. So thank you again for sharing all the perspectives, and it's something that we will keep knowing more and learning so much as I have today. I think it's gonna bring me also to a next level in my future work here in IRENA. So thank you very much.
Great, thank you. Kunjula, you have the final word. And you're muted. You need to unmute.
I don't have final thoughts. They're just starting. So, but I enjoy very much sharing the power together with all of you, the power of thinking, the power of discussion. That was quite inspiring. And I think it's really worth it that I keep on reanalyzing our data, and maybe there's something to publish. I will have a look. Now, I enjoyed very much also the comments flag from Beate and others as well, also in the chat. And I think it's a very important topic. Thank you very much. Great.
Thank you, everybody. I was really happy to moderate this session. I got quite inspired and excited from all of your inputs and from the really great chat. And I'm also happy to finish a little bit early. I will have a nice long lunch break, and we're back here at 2 p.m. I think. Stefan, you can tell us more, I'm sure.
Thanks a lot. This was a great discussion. I really enjoyed that. And indeed, we are even ahead of time, which is fantastic as well. Although we had really, I think, we have a lot of food for thought now. We will now conclude and continue at 2 o'clock Central European time. You know, we also have people in other time zones. So we send you with the invitation, the link where you can calculate your time zone wherever you are. And we will start at 2 o'clock with the next session, which will deal with what can community energy do to change the situation. So I'm very much looking forward. Christina Andre will moderate that session. We will have participants from various community energy groups, including a 100% female renewable energy cooperative from Germany. So we will have to have different perspective. I wish you now a nice, well, lunch break in Europe, whatever break you have, and hope to see many of you again in less than 2 hours.